Hey folks, Curtis Stone here. Today I thought I would chime in on this whole Aboriginal title thing in BC. I've talked about it a little bit in previous videos, but there's enough new developments and things that are coming around that I felt it would be time to weigh in on it again. Just got about 6 inches of snow, real snow now, but it's 1 degree Celsius, so that's just above freezing, and it's sketchy outside. So it's a day where I don't drive up or down my driveway, stay home, reflect. That's what we're gonna do now. All right, if you're paying attention to the media right now, the alternative media or the mainstream media, here in Canada and particularly out west here in British Columbia, there is a lot of hype, a lot of conversation going on right now about this whole Aboriginal title thing. And there's a lot to this. There's a lot of pieces on the micro and the macro that I'm observing. And I thought in this video, I would bring some of the main pieces together, offer some commentary, make some predictions about what I can see happening and some opportunities that I can see happening too. And then I'll wrap it up with a bow on top. So, what's going on right now? There is really we got to go back to the United Nations Declaration of the Right of Indigenous Peoples, also known as UNDRIP. This came to my attention probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and a lot of people have been talking about it ever since, especially people that are looking beyond the veil at the macro issues of what's going on and what does the establishment New World Order, what do they want to do and what are they trying to do? You know, we've all heard the term, you'll own nothing and be happy, that came out with that viral World Economic Forum clip where it explained what the new world is going to look like. And even if you go beyond that and you go into the writings of these globalists, what it looks like is a global government with a global digital ID system and eventually a global digital currency. But I'm sure to start there'll be many different incarnations of that digital currency. But this is the direction that the elites of this world want us to go. They want us hacked, tracked, stacked, and packed in tiny shoebox apartments, living on universal basic income, eating a low protein diet, and keeping you in a state of subsistence, essentially. That's what they want. And that is written in their language all over the place. But they glorify it by saying that so much of that is, and your contribution is for climate change, is you're doing your part to make sure that you're living in a minimal impact way. And so as it pertains to the Indigenous rights and such, this UNDRIP came out, I forget how long it's been, but it's one of these UN declarations, and it's all it is an offering of a framework. It's none of this has force and effect it might in some countries at this point, but here in British Columbia, it has been put on the table. It hasn't been fully brought in, but when they bring things like this in, there's often many moving parts. The globalists like to move things on an international level, and then they subvert the community level, and they get all kinds of things going on down there. Think about programs like ICLEI and sustainable development, that every city council around this country has a plan for sustainable development. Part of these plans also pertains to this UNDRIP. And here in British Columbia, they put it into an act called DRIPA, Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act, and that is now on the table in British Columbia. And what's being done at this present moment is there are native bands that are making moves to grab land under the guise of, hey, it's Aboriginal title, we now want our piece of the pie. And the one that got the most attention that kind of really kicked this off recently was the controversial situation in Richmond, where the Cowichan Indian band has come forward and said, we want this chunk of land here. And what made that viral is a gentleman who said he got a a letter in the mail from Richmond. All of this is public information right now. And he says that he might not be able to refinance his home because the banks might not want to touch it. Now, there's a lot to this because this whole thing exposes a number of things. One, it brings up land title in and of itself. What is title? Who actually owns your property? Another thing it's bringing up is the sheer corruption of the Indian bands. Another thing it's bringing up is the specifics to Aboriginal title and what does that mean, showing that it's sort of this communist Marxist type thing. Another thing that's exposing is UNDRIP and the motives of the UN. And another thing that's really interesting that it's bringing up is how weak the province of British Columbia is, that they can kowtow to a tiny minority of people and throw their hands up and say, oh, okay, well, I guess it's yours now. So in the Richmond scenario, there is a number of commercial businesses and buildings and real estate on that piece of property. I believe there's an Amazon fulfillment center. There's all kinds of condominiums. Like, this isn't just some piece of land like mine out in the bush where the tribes say, well, you know, we hunted and fished on that property at one point in one time, and therefore it's ours. So it's really interesting, and because, you know, I'll go through each of these and then we'll kind of go in and around this. I have so many thoughts on all of this, but it really brings to light, how is it that this can happen? And what does that mean with your land title? And the scary thing, though I'm not scared by it, actually I'm excited by all this, to be honest with you. The scary thing, I guess, for many homeowners is that if you're living in an area that looks like it's going to have this happen to it, you might lose the financing on your property, but you might also fall into Aboriginal title. Now, Aboriginal title is, just think about an Indian band. So I'll use the term Indian just because the Indian Act and so on and so forth. There's many terms for what is broadly called Indigenous. We'll get into that as well. Indigenous doesn't have a statutory definition, a solid single statutory definition. It's broad. It's used broadly. But what do have statutory definitions here in Canada are Indian, as per the Indian Act, Native, Aboriginal, and First Nations. Those titles all get you on the reservation. So if you claim to be one of those four things or all of those four things and you have a status card and whatnot, you're on the reservation. When you're on the reservation, you can't own property. Now, it doesn't mean that Native Indians cannot own property. It just means they can't on the reservation because it falls under Aboriginal title. Now, Aboriginal title means that the band manages and owns the actual title of the property. All you get is a sort of a lease agreement type thing, and there's 99-year leases and whatnot. Got my little afternoon coffee and cacao going there. And so what an Aboriginal title is actually really easy to see. Go to an Indian band. Many people in Canada have at some point either been to an Indian band reservation or have passed them on a road or whatnot. And what you'll find with an Indian band reservation is it's not 100% the way through, of course. There are exceptions. But for the most part, Indian reservations don't look all that nice. They look kind of dumpy. The houses aren't taken care of. There's often broken cars in the broken down cars on the properties. There's all kinds of dumping of garbage going around. They're not taken care of very well, which is ironic because the natives often say, you know, this land is sacred, and then you go, well, how does the land you live on look? It doesn't look all that sacred to me. Having said that, it's a reality that a lot of Canadians understand when you put it that way. And if your property falls under what's going to be Aboriginal title, it might end up looking like that, because when you have Aboriginal title, what you have is a real world example of the tragedy of the commons, which comes out of the critique of communism and socialism and such, where you don't have individual skin in the game. Therefore, you don't have incentive to make something better or improve on something. You have the commons where, hey, well, it's not mine. Why would I care about it? Why would I put money into it? And so I think this is terrifying a lot of people who own property who are in areas that might be compromised by these Aboriginal land titles. Now, it's not totally clear. There isn't a single unified message with all the bands that says, this is what we want. There's a little bit of a mixed bag. There's some that say it'll go to Aboriginal title. That means that it'll go into the collective ownership of the band. Some are saying we just want to be paid out, so we want the province of British Columbia to pay us for the value of the land. We've also heard a little bit of, well, now you'll pay your property taxes to the Indian band. And there isn't, as I say, there's not a single unified message on this right now. It's a bit of a mixed bag where there's certain quote unquote Indigenous leaders chiming in and saying, oh no, it's like this. Oh, the one that I'm hearing is, yeah, we just want the recognition of title, which will grant us the title, but don't worry, we don't want your stuff, we just want the recognition. And it's kind of like saying, we want the legal authority to control your stuff, and we have the ability to do so, but trust us, we won't do anything, right? And if you know anything about Native bands in Canada, there is a very common reputation that they are incredibly corrupt. I mean, I don't even know if this is controversial to say. It's not really. Let's just be honest. There's a tiny minority of people in Indian bands who get all the upside. The people in the band council and the chiefs, it's a complete racket. Just talk to other Indians who are not in that inner circle, and you'll hear it. There's such a dichotomy in opinions in Canada when you hear from the chiefs, which are the appointed by the Canadian government as per the Indian Act, to the hereditary chiefs, who are the cultural chiefs that are recognized as leaders in those areas or in those groups. There's a huge diversity of opinions and stories and all of this on the matter, but for the most part, it's a boondoggle. And when I grew up in Kelowna, there was the West Bank First Nations was run by a guy named Ron Derrickson, and so many people in the 90s and early 2000s heard stories about how corrupt he was and the kinds of things that he was involved in. He was a global jet setter, and he's living high on the hog. And then you go through the reservation and it looks like most reservations. And so this is another thing that is really good about what this is exposing, because this is a boondoggle. Ever since this Truth and Reconciliation Committee was formed in Canada, because of the alleged unmarked graves of 215 children that are allegedly buried somewhere around the Kamloops Residential School. To this day, not a single body has been found. So it's not to say, I can't make the claim that it's not true, but I certainly can't make the claim that it is true, because the burden of proof is on he who makes the claim. And so those who have made the claim have yet to produce a burden of proof. And so it is exposing the corruption of that. They've taken $315 million for a community that has, I think it's hundreds of people. Do the math on that one. And I can assure you that it's not your average Aboriginal person in the community that's getting $1 million check. I can assure you that is not what is happening. It's a boondoggle, racketeering like it typically is, but this is exposing that. And so it's a good thing. Another thing that's really great about it is it's also exposing the hypocrisy and idiocracy of modern day leftism, where you have all of these in the province of British Columbia. It's the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is our sort of Marxist party. They're, I guess you could say, more left than liberals, and they want all this Aboriginal title. And so there's a new party in British Columbia that's formed. I think there's 2 or 3 members to it, but they are making waves. And I don't have any hope for them politically on the provincial side. I think it's all going to fall down, and I'll speak to that later in this video. But this group 1BC is calling out all these leftist NDP idiots who are saying they want people to throw their property in Aboriginal title, and they're making a list of they've put out a list of all the MPs that have nice fancy properties in West Vancouver, North Vancouver, etc., to say, hey, lead by example and throw your property title into the mix and see how you do, because guaranteed all of them have big mortgages on those properties. So it's exposing this whole thing of, put your money where your mouth is or shut up. And it's amusing. It's amusing to watch. But another thing that is really coming out on this is the UN's motives in all of this. Because if you pull the lens back a little bit and you see things like UNDRIP and stuff like that, and then how it fits into this whole broader agenda to make you own nothing, because the globalists want to live in a world where nobody owns property. That's just for them in their private clubs, in their private villas, and Canary Islands properties and such, where or the Cayman Islands and things like that, where they can shelter their property and their lifestyle, but then the rest of us are with the proles kind of slogging it out in the 5G smart cities. That's how they want it. But this is exposing this. And what I can't help but think is the old saying, if you've paid attention to the globalists, is order out of chaos. Is what they like to do is sow disorder to bring, to sow chaos to bring in a new type of order. And there is so much chaos politically going on globally right now. And we're just talking about British Columbia and Canada right now. There's so much chaos going on that you can't help but wonder if it isn't all just part of the plan. Whether this whole BC Aboriginal title thing is going exactly the way they want it to or not. But in and of itself, there is chaos going right now. And there is this whole thing is starting to, it looks like, cause a bit of an insurrection. Just as I record this today, I saw a clip of John Rustat, who is the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia, who lost the election by a sliver. And it's interesting, if you look at a voting demographic of British Columbia, the vast majority of land, like 90% of the landmass of BC voted for Conservatives, but it's this tiny sliver in Vancouver Lower Mainland that is orange or New Democrat NDPs. And there's a lot of suspicion that the election was rigged to begin with. I think it was, but I can't prove that. But it looks like there's a lot of people making the case that it is. So geographically, they're a tiny minority. Now, by numbers, they're a majority. But it does show that there is a massive pushback to all of this. And the lack of force, of coercive force that this province has is really interesting. How is it that these tiny minority of people are able to come in and make these kinds of claims? And they just kowtow to it. And John Rustat today said that he's going to be starting a class action lawsuit, and he's encouraging everybody in British Columbia who owns property, and potentially even Canada, to sue the government over this, because they didn't inform us on the security of our properties. And if you look up the British Columbia Land Titles Act, Articles 23 and 25, in a Supreme Court ruling, was ruled that they have no force and effect. So those are the two articles that essentially give you the security of owning your property. Is it an impeachable title or some wording like that says, if you have the title, we protect that title. And so this is all up in the air right now. And so people are freaking out about it. And some sort of chaos that is going to ensue is, right now, and I've been talking about this for years now. I've been talking about this since COVID. You can go back and look at my live streams when I was, and many other videos where I mentioned this, is that property values are teetering on the edge here in British Columbia. And a big reason for that, and this whole new title thing is going to bring even more uncertainty to the market. But the main reason for that is that during the COVID show, when people were panicking to get on the land, like I did, but have not left, people bought these expensive properties at super high valuations, but interest rates were at an all-time low. And a big scam in Canada, if you didn't know already, is our 5-year mortgage scam. It's an absolute scam. So you get a 30-year mortgage, but unlike in the United States, where you lock the interest rate in for 30 years, it only locks in for 5 years. So the property is overvalued at, say, $1.9 million, but you got it for a 1.4% interest rate, which is pretty low on a property that high. But now your interest rate's your interest rate at 5 years later is now double or triple, but the property value isn't renegotiated. So how's that for a deal? So those renewals are coming up now. And there's a lot of people in Canada that are freaking out because for the last year or so, they renewed and they've been carrying an unsustainable amount of a mortgage payment. Like they might have been in at $2,000, but now they're paying $4,500, $5,000, even $6,000 for the same mortgage. That's a big increase of a monthly payment for your average family. Now you couple in the uncertainty of this Aboriginal title. So we already have a record number of people in Canada right now going through this process called power of sale, which is not quite a foreclosure, but it's sort of like it, where you can't make the payments on your property and you go to the bank and say, look, we can't make the payments. So before you go bankrupt, they say, well, let's do a power of sale, which we push the property on the market, try to sell it at market value, and then you get away without being, losing the property and owing money. You at least maybe just lose the property and walk away with nothing or something, a little bit of something. So there's a record number of those going on right now. And there's already, so there's a bunch of people who can't renew their mortgage or they're about to bail on it. Now we've got the uncertainty of these Aboriginal titles where the banks are going, well, we don't know if we want to invest in these because it's uncertain what the title means. Because if it's an Aboriginal title as it's currently known, meaning collective ownership by the band, we don't really want to invest in those properties in the same way as we would a traditional fee simple. So this is massive chaos that is about to hit your average homeowner, and people are flipping out. But the one thing that is, before I go there, let me just say, on a personal note, I have a friend who just sold a property in Kelowna for $400,000 less than she paid for it 4 years ago. So chew on that. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the real estate market. I've been talking about this for years. I'm actually surprised it's gone on this long, that it's just kind of kicked that can down the road. But here we are. There's a lot of uncertainty, and this Aboriginal title thing is going to make it even worse. So where is this going to go? Well, I hope there's an opportunity for Canadians to wake up to the reality that this government in Canada is a complete joke. And it didn't just start when the Liberals got in and did 2 terms in a row. It was 2 terms of Trudeau and then a term of Carney. It didn't just start then. Canada at a foundational level has been in trouble for a long time. There is the constitutional crisis that has been brewing here for a very long time, as per the 1982 Constitution, that was never fully ratified under Article 59 of the Charter, which was never put in because it could not have been met. If you read Article 59, it's a weird thing that says until Quebec allows students to be taught in the language of their choice, this bill has no force and effect. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Charter has no force and effect, because fundamentally, what it comes down to in Canada are judges, and judges are notoriously corrupt in this country. It's a boondoggle. A lot of them go to the same Masonic lodges, hang out together at the Legion. The Crown, the prosecutor, and the judge are all hanging out at the end of a trial having a beer because they're all in on it. It's a big racket. And it's been that way for a very long time. But this is exposing a lot of things, and it's exposing the corruption of the native bands, the fragility of the Canadian Constitution and the Canadian parliamentary system in and of itself. It's so corrupt to the core. It's built on a foundation of lies. It's a bunch of nothing. And in the current environment, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of chaos being sown. There's this 51st state thing where, Canada's looking pretty bankrupt. Trump is down there saying, let's make Canada the 51st state. A lot of Canadians support that because, it's fairly easy to make the case. If we were part of the U.S., we'd probably be better off than we are now. But I would say maybe there's a better option than that. Maybe if Canada is falling apart And if there's a loss of confidence in the provinces and the country itself, maybe it's time to come together and bring in a new constitution. And I came across the work of a man named Bruce Pardy, who wrote a new constitution, and it was for Alberta. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to it, and I'm actually going to have him on my show coming up soon. And if you have any thoughts on this, please share them in the comments below and let me know what you think. And if you have any questions for Bruce, I'm going to be looking at these comments. I put it out on Twitter as well and Facebook. And this constitution that he has written addresses a lot of the fundamental problems with Canada. He addresses the power, the uneven power, the scales of power that the government and the parliamentary system have under the Governor General, where they can almost do anything they want. It puts that in check. He talks about the money and a system where the resources of the country can pay for the things that a government needs. But he also significantly reduces the size and the cost of government. It's a fantastic document. And I think there's enough momentum right now. We have enough things falling apart that if people really start to come together and say, no, we've had enough. We've had enough. We need to come together as people in geographical areas and say, we're done with this. It's time for a new system. We don't need to be sending 80% of our income from the province of British Columbia and Alberta out to Ottawa so that it can be a giant boondoggle out there where the Laurentian elite pretty much control this country and there's no representation fairly out west. People have had enough of that. And this Indigenous land title thing brings in a whole new incentive for people to now have skin in the game and say, you're going to screw with my property? I don't think so. And because, think about it this way. All of a sudden, these Aboriginal groups, we're going to pay our property taxes to them. Well, does that mean that they're going to all of a sudden take over the responsibility for all the things you pay property tax for? Property tax in Canada is one of the few, if not only, tax you pay that actually has line items that says this many dollars went to this many dollars went to that. I don't know, and correct me if there is one. I've never seen one, but property tax is the only thing out there. So are the Aboriginal groups all of a sudden going to take responsibility for stuff? Sorry to be the bearer of bad news and say something totally offensive and politically incorrect, is they're not very well known for taking responsibility, especially for things outside of themselves. They're supposed to be self-determined. And if you read, it's really interesting. Another really interesting little factoid in this whole thing is if you read Article 3 of UNDRIP, it says Indigenous communities have the right to self-determination. But go back 50 or more years and read the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and it says in Article 1, everyone has the right to self-determination and can freely choose their own economic and political cultural status. So what is that? So 50 years ago, the ICCPR, which every single Western nation signed on to, that's a treaty. Treaty level is the highest jurisdictional authority in the statute world. So they say it up there, US, Canada, you name it, they all signed on to it. Everybody has a right to self-determination. Everyone. So that isn't every person, resident, citizen. It's everyone. Everyone is an all-encompassing term, means you have self-determination. But then they say later, 50 so years later under UNDRIP, Indigenous people have right to self-determination. So who is it? Which one is it? I came out not too long ago and said, I think we should occupy the term Indigenous, because in UNDRIP, they don't actually define it, because they want you to come to the assumption, this is a very common trick in law, is they want you to come to the assumption. And the old legal maxim goes is ignorance is an excuse in a court of law. The fact that you didn't know, that's your problem. Sounds like they want you to come to the conclusion that Indigenous means Aboriginal, Native, First Nations, and Indian. But I don't see evidence in a statutory way that that is the truth. So maybe we're all Indigenous. Maybe the UN wants to just give us the land back. Now, I'm not saying that they do, because we know they don't. But maybe they're putting something in there so that they're not culpable and say, hey, well, you didn't come forward. You didn't come forward and claim self-determination. So why should we give it to you? Maybe this is our time to claim self-determination. Maybe this is our time to come together and say, we're from this land, this foreign corporation known as Canada that's registered at 501 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., that's running the securities of this show. Because Canada isn't land. Canada is a pile of securities, which is your birth certificate. And you're essentially an asset on a ledger. The land is, what is the land? Who has the land? You know, as it is in BC here, they say, you know, every time you go to a public event of any kind, whether it's a government event or a press conference at a hospital, to a sports event, to a volleyball championship at your daughter's high school, they start with this little song and dance virtue signal where they go, before we start today's proceedings, we want to acknowledge that we're standing on the unceded or treaty territory of blah, blah, blah nation. Now, and that whole thing is ridiculous. It's a pointless virtue signal. It literally, it's not that it means nothing. It actually means everything. But when people say it, liberals are classically known for, people on the left are typically known for wanting to say the government should do something, but then when it comes to putting skin in the game, they're kind of a no-show. It's like your typical busybody person who shows up for your community action group, whatever it is. I've been involved in dozens of these over my life. And they say, we should do this, we should do that. But then when you push them and say, well, are you ready to show up and do these meetings and make it all, they're going, oh, no. That's what liberals do, is that they're sitting there and say, oh, I'll virtue signal about Indigenous title all you want. But then now you want to put my land into the Indian band? Oh, I'm not so sure. So it's exposing the hypocrisy of all of this. And it's great. It really is great. But where this could go, we could have a real potential here to turn this country around. The question is, are people willing to put boots on the ground and skin in the game to make it happen? Because you're not going to be able to, we are not going to be able to rely on the provincial Conservative Party or even the One BC Party to do anything significant. The entire parliamentary system is flawed at its core. And Bruce Pardy does a great job of explaining why that is. And that's one thing we'll get into when he comes on the show, is we'll talk about that fundamental reason why it is flawed. But it's like, you can't expect a broken system to fix something. It's broken at the core. We need something altogether new. So I'm sort of optimistic on where this can go. I think there is order that will come out of the chaos, and hopefully that is the order for us as the people and not the New World Order. Hopefully we can come together in geographical areas and say, we need to band together, we need to work together. We are Indigenous, we are from this land, we're not giving our land away, we're not going to let, we're not going to be bullied by 2% of the population, which is the Aboriginal population in Canada. And we're certainly not going to be bullied by a province that doesn't seem to have any force and effect. The fact that these Aboriginal bands can just come down and the province is just going along with it shows that either, one, they have no force and effect, two, they're corrupt, or three, they're playing a bigger part of this whole move to get you off your land so that you own nothing and are happy, get you into collective land ownership where we're all on the reservation. And that is the issue of the moment. So I'll leave it there for this one, folks. Leave your questions, comments below. I'm going to be talking to Bruce Pardy. This Constitution that he's written, I think, has a lot of potential, and maybe British Columbia needs to separate from the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island and become its own sovereign nation, because you can see by the voting demographics that part of the West Coast is left-wing and crazy. And that's typical. Usually where populations are, they're left-wing. I've had a saying for the longest time that says, where the money flows, the policy goes. And where the money flows is where the population is. because where you have greater numbers of population, you need greater amounts of infrastructure, greater amounts of investment, greater amounts of concrete. I've said for a very long time, there's a direct correlation between concrete and tyranny. Where you have lots of concrete, infrastructure, thus money, you have more force and effect, you have more government, you have therefore more leftist policies, because leftists vote for government-free stuff because they're dependent on it. Whereas people like myself who live in the country and have to plow our own roads and have off-grid power systems and have our own septic systems and grow our own food, we're used to taking responsibility for ourselves, unlike people in the cities who outsource it to a government office. That's why left-wing groups are always in urban centers. And so this goes back to what I've been talking about for years, is this great urban to rural divide, which is really starting to come down now. People in the countryside have had enough of liberals in urban centers who are disconnected from reality, telling us how we should live our lives. The answer is no, we're not having it. We're going to go our own way and form our own government, and hopefully we can do something positive this time around. So I'll leave it there for this one, folks. If you like that video, smash the like, subscribe to my channel, share this video with your friends, and again, leave a question or comment below. And before I go, I just want to say I've got some new content out recently at freedomfarmers.com. I'm only streaming at freedomfarmers.com right now, so you can pay a small amount per month or join up for a larger subscription. There is a discount code below in the show notes. Check that out. I've also got a new firewood course that shows you everything to do with my firewood system. So not just how to maintain firewood, split it, have the right systems in place to manage it, but how do you burn it well? What are the right types of wood? How do you season it? Looking at my infrastructure from my boiler to my wood stoves to my wood cook stove, and how that's tied into my whole domestic hot water system. This course covers it all. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes there. Hope to see you there, and I'll see you in the next one.